So it's a really important one. And one of the things that we've looked at, and you see some really best practice of this. Like, do you remember the cyber breach from British Library? I think it was about a year ago. They were really open and transparent about their lessons learned and what they did. And, I hold my hand up to them because I think it helped do a lot of forward thinking in that space. And what we've seen is there's a lot of good best practice out there. And as an example, so in terms of ethical and responsible, we have, very strong values and a strong mission where we work. We're a humanitarian children's charity, as you would expect. So we spent a lot of time up front in terms of looking at, okay, we have a policy global that we're going to, but in terms of actually showing it from an ethical and responsible way, it's focusing very much on training and the change management. And rather than us inventing our own policy, we focus more on usage guidance. So guidance around use cases avoid, training to come onto that. We've also looked at showing the onus is on that if you're using this on an organizational time, it is part of your ongoing training and induction there. So in your contract of employment. So a lot of the change management and the change of mindset went along with that. And exactly to your point, important around this was our governance. We have an AI council that really, where something comes to it, it has to almost be an approved use of that use case by that council to say, A, is it aligned to our strategy? Does it make sense to do? And as an example, is it aligned with our policies and our strategy? And an example of this is we also wanted to put this framework and guardrails in place, but we didn't want to limit, say, innovation and seeing that come up. So it's kind of the freedom within the framework. As an example, one of our humanitarian workers who used to spend 3 hours a day monitoring 25 to 30 humanitarian channels just to see if there's an emergency, if there's an incident that's coming up, using a form of Power Platform and Copilot has now created an automated work tool to effectively monitor all these and push things out at certain times. She did this off her own back. And so that's the type of use cases that we want to see coming through this. So in terms of that, I think but at the same time, it's really that governance, the training, AI council, and the change management that is aligning it back to what we view as ethical and responsible use, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's really important. And one of the things we've been using, and it's a foundational thing, which is Microsoft's a key partner across a lot of not-for-profit sector. They have what's called a TSI framework and in effect, you look at job architecture, job families, almost not-for-profit type use cases and processes and operations. And it's not vanilla enough, but it's generic in that it would almost be like 80% commonality versus, say, a financial services or FMCG. And what we've been looking at as we're building out these use cases is using a very sound business case value framework. So to look at what are the kind of OKRs and KPIs in the uplift that we actually see from the hypothesis of applying a form of AI to the specific use case. So as we've been going in, we've been really looking at that and saying, is this adding the value? But doing it in a way as well of not just turning it on and let's come back in 10 weeks and doing it, but also doing the very strategic usage adoption. Are people using it the right way? Are they getting the right training? And doing the diagnostics along the way to pull the different levers across there. So when I talked about we started building the foundations, we've also started thoughtfully about where we've started with this to show this is how we want to do it. You want to take a human-centric service design. So you're looking at your process, your operations, the tech, the usage. And then we've almost been kind of overcompensating on these first pilots of really around that strategic adoption and usage. The other aspect as well is if we're seeing stuff that is not going to work, then let's just quit it and look at something else. And I mentioned earlier, so you want to take that framework, but you also don't want to be too prescriptive because we also want to show, I mentioned the earlier use case, we also want to see the organic innovation of I guess part of it would come down to your democratization of your tech and data. And that's a meaningful way to do it. And so we just want to make sure that we're thoughtfully as we go into this and we look at the different applications and potential use cases, that it's being done with those foundations in place. For us, for a charity, so I have to convince our board for the continual investment in this. So we're showing it both on those sides. And what I would say is, there's the unavoidable. As I said, we've got decreasing growth, increasing cost, increasing inefficiencies. We need to show both sides of it, both the efficiencies, but potential cashable savings, but also the uplift around the different, we want to have impact for children and communities we serve. How do you quantify that? So we've had to take, I would put it this way, heart of a charity, mind of a business. So we've had to take a more commercial approach to how we do that in the not-for-profit.